Welcome to the Databricks Skill Builder series. We're glad you're here.
Welcome to the Databricks AWS Marketplace Deployment walkthrough. My name is David Wells. I'm a Specialist Solution Architect, and I will be going through this journey with you. So what is the AWS Marketplace? The AWS Marketplace is a place that AWS users can leverage and subscribe to third-party services, SaaS services, professional services, etc., to have a single pane of glass for your permissions, deployment, billing, etc. And Databricks allows you to subscribe to Databricks services via the AWS Marketplace itself. So if you would like to deploy Databricks through the AWS Marketplace, there are a couple of prerequisite steps that we recommend that you consider. The first is obvious. You must have an active AWS account, and you must have a user with access to the console UI because certain steps have to be performed in the AWS console UI. Furthermore, you should have an active email account. And the reason we say active email account is because the email that you use when you create the account will become the account admin. So you want to put some consideration if that's going to be a group email, whatever path you choose. Second, you'll want to subscribe to the Databricks service within the AWS Marketplace. And in order to do that, you require the AWS Marketplace Manage Subscriptions policy. This allows the user to subscribe to the Databricks service itself. You can leverage the AWS Marketplace full access permission, or if you're an administrator, but we don't recommend this path. We recommend that you have the minimal permissions required. Once you have subscribed to Databricks and created the account, you'll want to deploy a workspace. Deploying a workspace requires permissions to set up your AWS account for the way that Databricks requires it. And so the permissions required for that deployment phase are listed within the appendix, but don't worry about copying that down because it's also listed within the stages themselves. So what is the process to deploy Databricks on AWS Marketplace? Well, there are two paths that take you to the same destination. The first path is go to databricks.com/AWS signup. And this will take you to a landing page where you put in some information, but it will ultimately send you to the AWS Marketplace itself to sign up. Once you go to the AWS Marketplace, you want to subscribe to the Databricks service, and that will take you through a wizard that will allow you to create your Databricks account, tie it to your AWS account, create and deploy your workspace within your AWS account, deploy your first compute just to test that it's working. And then we have some recommended next steps for what to do after you finish that step. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have here the AWS Marketplace landing page. So if you just go to aws.amazon.com/marketplace, you can take one of two steps. You can either search for Databricks, or if like me, it's right on the front page, you're able to just click on that. This essentially takes you to an overview page that provides you information like our AWS reInvent talk in 2024, a product video that walks through the high-level steps we're going through in this video, details about the service, the cost system, which if you're not familiar with Databricks' cost model, we work off consumption. So if you don't use Databricks, we don't charge you. Additional information like your user license agreement, links to videos on how to configure the environment, documentation, etc. And then finally, once you get to a point where you want to subscribe, you can either subscribe through the AWS Marketplace, or if you would like to speak to a representative, you can either reach out to sales@databricks.com or AWS MP onboarding help@databricks.com to be able to speak to someone about your considerations. So let's go ahead and view purchase options. This takes you to a summary of the previous page for the most part. The only element that is relevant to this page versus the other is the purchase order number. If you have worked with Databricks sales towards negotiating some sort of opportunity with us, you're able to put in that purchase number now at this phase. Otherwise, if just like within this demo, if you don't have a purchase order, you can just go ahead and click subscribe. What this does is it launches the link to set up your account wizard. And so we're going to go ahead and click on that. And so I mentioned earlier that deploying the workspace requires a number of permissions. This is where those permissions are provided. What you can do is you can click copy permissions and send the permissions to an administrator, or you can verify within your account by clicking go to IAM controls that you have all the required permissions to deploy the workspace when we get to that phase. Whether you send the permissions to administrator and they provide you temporary access, you verify that you have them yourself. The next phase is to actually create the account. So we're going to go ahead and click create account. And what this will do is it will launch a Databricks signup page. And this Databricks signup page allows you to put in the email address that will become the account administrator. And so you want to put in your email address or an account type email address managed by your procurement team, but you're going to go ahead and put that in. Because this is a demo, I'm going to go ahead and cheat a bit and I'm going to put a dummy email in. I'm going to put my information in and then I'm going to click sign up. So this will create your Databricks account and it will link that account to your AWS Marketplace subscription. So we're going to go ahead and go back to this page and you'll see you're successfully linked to your Databricks account, which is fantastic. You can then click the next button. This page allows you to configure what will become your first workspace within your Databricks account. In order to deploy a workspace, you need to select certain properties of the workspace itself. The first one is the region that you will deploy in. So let's go ahead and pick US East 2 for this demo. The next thing that you want to set up is your storage location. When you deploy a workspace, the workspace will have files, it'll have tables, it'll have notebooks, etc. And so when you are saving or modifying these files, you need somewhere to store them. And so by default, workspaces often have a workspace bucket associated with them. And this allows you to create new items without having to worry about where they're stored or what the underlying cloud permissions are, because it allows you to abstract away the complexity for your users so that they can focus on making the beer better, if you like that analogy. So how does Databricks Compute access this storage? Well, in order to access the storage, you use a role that has the required permissions to read, write, update the bucket's contents. And so the role itself is what Databricks assumes on your behalf in order to be able to execute the commands that it requires. And so this part will create the storage role that Databricks will use when we're performing actions on your behalf. The second half of Databricks is the compute itself. So whether or not you're using the Databricks runtime, which is essentially Databricks version of a Spark cluster, modernized for the cloud, or if you're using Databricks SQL, deploying that compute within your environment requires permission. And so this role will allow you to deploy that compute within your environment. If you have other buckets within your Databricks environment that you would want this workspace to have access, you have the option to add them to the process so that you can create a role that's able to access them. And then you can set up permissions for the users within your workspace to be able to read, delete, copy the data from those buckets for whatever purpose. A great example is if you have a landing zone for new data coming into a bucket, you'd be able to mount that bucket and then be able to access it as part of your users' data engineering steps. So that's what Databricks will do on your behalf. The next section goes into the where. So I mentioned that we can deploy compute within your AWS account. So in order to be able to deploy that compute, Databricks has a requirement towards how VPCs, subnets, firewall rules, security groups, etc. are deployed. And this section essentially deploys a new set of configurations for your new workspace. And so you're able to see what new objects Databricks is going to create in the cloud on your behalf. So we'll be creating a new VPC that's a /16. We'll create an internet gateway with elastic IP. You'll have an S3 gateway endpoint, NAT gateway, etc. And you're able to review the configuration objects that we'll be deploying in on your behalf. At the very end, you have the acknowledgement that we are going to be performing these actions within your cloud. So you want to go ahead and click the accept button and then click next. So This takes us to a review page that goes over exactly what Databricks will be doing, allows you to edit it if you decide that you want to change anything. But since we're comfortable with what we're going to do, we want to click Launch Project. And this will take you through a process that will take about 5 minutes, generally speaking, to actually go in and deploy these resources on your behalf. And so we're deploying the resources both on your AWS account, creating the new VPC that we mentioned, the subnets, and configuring your Databricks account to know that these exist so that Databricks knows, hey, you want a new cluster within this workspace configured on this VPC with these subnets and these S3 buckets. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy the compute in subnet X as you requested. All right, I paused the video so you wouldn't have to wait around while it deployed. You'll see a red outline here. That's just because my browser's blocking any pop-ups, but we'll go ahead and click that button, and then we are going to put in the email address that we use to sign up. Databricks, if you're not familiar, has removed user managed passwords. We recommend all enterprises use their identity provider and single sign-on. We'll get into details and recommended best practices to deploy and secure your workspace. Well, that one-time password pops up. There we go. As you can see, our first workspace is being provisioned. So we'll just wait, and there we go. So the workspace, as we described, let me zoom in a bit there, is essentially deployed on your behalf. And again, you saw how many steps were involved with the workspace deployment, about 26. So this AWS Marketplace deployment essentially takes care of those steps for you. Let's go through some of the configuration options you have. Well, it's already running. Well, we'll go through them anyways. So first is the settings, where you have the ability to configure your plan. If you're not familiar, choose what features are available to you, whether or not you want to be on a premium plan or enterprise plan. If you reach out to Databricks' sales at databricks.com, we're happy to walk you through the options, of course. But for the purpose of this walkthrough, premium is fine. It has the exact same compute as enterprise. The enterprise option more has services that enterprises typically require. The second is authentication, the ability to create emergency access accounts, the ability to have multi-factor authentication, to integrate single sign-on, etc., user provisioning. All of these options can be configured for your account. The second part is the cloud resources that I mentioned. So when you deploy a workspace, the Databricks needs to know what the VPC is, what the subnets are, what the object IDs are within your AWS environment, such as the credentials that were used for your cross-account role, your storage configuration. So what is the actual bucket that your workspace is using? If you have other buckets that you want read-only access, read-write access, etc. to, you can set those. What are the networking configurations for your workspace? So the VPC ID. If you have private link, we don't have private link set up yet, but there's a private access setting. We don't have that because we don't need it yet, but it allows you to configure those type of options, such as the network policies, etc. User management, this is where you can manually add users, your service principals into Databricks. So if you want to start collaborating with some of your colleagues, you're able to do that there. And then a metastore. So Unity Catalog works off the concept of a metastore. And think of a metastore as the ability to track data across the data and AI lifecycle in a more governed manner. So what I mean by that is, historically speaking, it's very difficult to manage things like object files, like video or CSV files, JSON files, etc. Unity Catalog allows you to set permissions across raw data, organized data, feature sets, etc. And the Metastore is the system that tracks those configurations, the data, permissions associated with those data, and the users, etc. All right, let's go ahead and go into our workspace. So to go into the workspace, we're just going to click on the name. Here you can see the configuration for that workspace, such as a Metastore. What are the permissions for users? I'm obviously an administrator. Let's go into the workspace itself. There we go. We have a blank workspace. And so you can see here, you're able to go ahead and click Getting Started with your workspace, which takes you to the documentation for all the steps that you're able to perform. As what most people do once they start a workspace, but we're just going to go ahead. The first thing I want to show you is the catalog. The catalog is a three-tier naming convention. So you have your catalog, you have your schema, which is also known as a database, and then you have your object level, so a table or a model, etc. All of that is managed within the catalog view. So for example, this workspace has a default schema, has a legacy Hive metastore that you can configure if you need that sort of function, what your Delta sharing. Because this is a new system, there's not much here other than the system tables, which allow you to see your audit trails. So the next step that we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and create some compute. So I'm just going to go ahead, keep it simple, and have the default storage. And this will allow us to start a classic compute within your environment to make sure that everything's running. That will take about 5 minutes to deploy. We'll just go ahead and pause while that gets started. All right. So we see that the compute launched successfully. So what do we do now? What are the next steps? So from here, you have a couple different options. If you've deployed your workspace with a specific purpose, either you're doing a proof of concept, proof of value, testing, kicking the tires with Databricks, you have the ability to use a getting started tutorial, which I have here. The getting started tutorial, which again, the link should be in the deck sent to you with this video, has a number of example scenarios that you can run within your workspace, such as querying and visualizing data, creating a table, building an ETL pipeline using Apache Spark, training and deploying an ML model, etc. It allows you to test out these scenarios, see how it's done within Databricks, what's the code, what's the syntax. It's easy, but it has really good instructions. The second one, you want to collaborate with your coworkers. So I mentioned earlier within the admin account, you have the ability to add users directly, but if you're more in an enterprise setup or deployment, you have the ability to configure single sign-on, to add users to your workspace, to add data within your workspace through S3. And then finally, you've tested Databricks, you and your colleagues are happy with it, you want to turn this into an enterprise service, you want to secure your Databricks environment. So Databricks has an opinionated approach on how to secure Databricks itself. And we break that down into essentially 3 steps. And that is your defend, deploy, and monitor stages. So defend is your security best practices. So what are the controls that I want that will protect me from specific risks and specific scenarios? The security best practices will walk you through your common controls for most deployments, controls that you want for highly secure workspaces. And remember that you can set controls for specific workspaces versus other workspaces, which gives you the flexibility to have higher level of controls within a production workspace versus your development workspace. It allows you to set the controls for specific attack and threat models. So if you're worried about data exfiltration, it goes through the protect, detect, and respond controls that you can set up within Databricks, within your AWS accounts, within your security monitoring, etc. Once you have identified the controls that you want, the deploy stage is essentially leveraging infrastructure as code templating to be able to easily deploy these workspaces. The security reference architecture is a Git repo that has what I call a completely locked down workspace. So to be able to deploy a workspace with no outbound internet connectivity, all connectivity goes through what we call private link so that nothing traverses the public internet, etc. And it allows you to start from extremely secure and work your way back to the minimal set of controls that you want for your workspace, and then to templatize it so that you can deploy it very easily and continually. Finally, you want to be able to monitor and verify that Databricks is secure and remains secure. So how do you know that somebody didn't turn off a control, or how do you know that there's no configuration drift over time? The security analysis tool essentially allows you to monitor for your act as a posture management system that'll continually monitor your environment at whatever frequency you schedule it to, daily, weekly, hourly, whatever frequency makes sense for your organization, to say, hey, do I have a base set of controls on my account and on every workspace? And for these workspaces, I also want to check to make sure that we have controls XYZ and be able to customize it to whatever your organizational needs are. And then finally, set up alerts whenever something's detected as wrong. And those are the main steps that we recommend to start your journey down Databricks. I hope you found this how-to tutorial useful, and as we're always happy to help, so feel free to reach out to help@databricks.com or work through your account team, and we can set up time to work with you if needed. Take care and have a great day.